So I am incredibly excited that you joined this hackathon. I met these guys just a month ago. Yvonne was nice enough to introduce us. I've loved this project for so long. One of my friends in Malaysia spends his weekends going into jungles and putting solar lights in where people have no electricity. So the fact that I suggested that we do something with blockchain. You applied and inserted yourself on the hackathon, so thank you. I was like, oh. So I love every one of these projects, but this was just a happy surprise. So I'm going to give you guys this space.
Thank you very much. Very kind. Actually, when you wrote to us, I was trying to understand how a grassroots organizer would be connected to the hackathon. But 3 years ago, we started working with UNESCO to really legitimize how light has impacted. So on May 16 is going to be for the first International Day of Light. It's going to be in Paris. How technology, just like computers, you can use fiber optics. It's changed lives. But what was really interesting for us was about this. How do you not only celebrate the Day of Light for high technologies and people that are already doing well and gaining more impact out of these new innovations? So this is the population of the world. But the big challenge really for us is how do you bring light to people who are really off-grid by nature, hard to reach? And so we didn't invent this, but we got inspired by a bottom-up approach by Muhammad Yunus, how 5 people, social capital, was so important and so neglected in solving critical solutions. Yes, you hear that bottom-down, but what can be a great bottom-up approach? So 3 years before May 16, we were thinking, how can we revolutionize a bottom-up approach by using the precepts of Muhammad Yunus? So I'm just going to play this a bit. So what we did basically was we realized that 60 to 80% of the UN funds to bring solar light to the camps and to the villages was all spent on logistics. China and India putting it on crates, renting the space on the boat. By the time I play it. And so what 60 to 80% to put it on trucks to go to the village? How could we change that? We realized that the women in cooperatives had the same kind of reliability, that they had 98% repayment rate. Now, how do we get the lights to the villages? First of all, it has to be repairable, it has to be scalable, so we use very simple technology. The circuit. We used very simple technology to be able to teach people how to buy local materials, and if it breaks, not throw the whole thing away, but just replace it. So solar panels are good for 25 years. Sometimes we don't get, glass, so what we do is plastic bottles to be able to repair it. But the nice thing there is we were so surprised that we found a cheap logistical way to do it. So their husband farmers would go to the markets, wet markets all over the world, and what happens is they come back with empty crates. So women would call us and ask for credit. So it's like microcredit, but using materials. And we would put it on the baskets of these farmers, and they would travel for hours and hours and up to the mountains, into the jungles, even on some islands, and supply these women. Now, do they actually repair it well? Where they do, because if they don't repair it well and they don't fix it well, then the neighbor would be complaining. So we found out that this is very high reliability, that from the bottom up, solar could be a revolution. Now, what does that mean for us? We can scale this. We have an ongoing success all around the world in still its beginning forms on climate action. We know that we can create from moving kerosene lamps to solar, not by a centralized world supply chain, but actually sourced in every village that will be able to hub and spoke, to be able to repair it. Now, the most important one is not looking at large solar plants, hydro plants, because their electrical lines do not go to these poor communities. They go over these poor communities. So it's not easy to say, okay, just give them solar plants. The biggest failure is micro solar. It is designed to break. Because of the long logistics, they give cheaper batteries to make a profit. Now, once again, This is the first large project of UNESCO, partner with the International Day of Light. So how many were we able to do in 3 years? 1 million solar homes. We have 1,400 youth members and a super hyper local production. All around the world, we have people with buckets, and sometimes they go to electronic junkyards getting buckets of repair parts. Something that they never trusted them to do by putting it into microcircuits that they know when it breaks, there's no way to repair it. So we built one of the largest in the world, but of course, when I say largest, we're just actually beginning, of 650 cooperatives, centralized with supply chains, with vegetable supply chains, if you want to call it, but we're able to create rental systems or sell systems of solar hand lights, home lights, and street lights.
So when we decided to join the hackathon, our coding so far consisted of things like this. So when we looked at blockchain, we looked at what are our main challenges. Money-wise, we realized we have a hard time attracting individual donors, and we will move a lot of money to external partners, large monies also internationally, which is very expensive. Material-wise, we realized we don't have a transparency that we'd like to have, so we have started to create a vision that is just based on if we give complete transparency, we can have fantastic storytelling. We know where each part could go by tokenizing the journey, and we could tell you within 9 feet where your $50 have gone, and the storytelling would continue that you have enabled a 7-year-old girl to start reading at night. So we see great potential there. When it comes to being a partner for big foundations, if we make it easy for them to say yes through having complete transparency, we believe that it's also a great win for us. So we jumped into this hackathon and we looked at one thing. We're not building a blockchain and then applying it to the real world. We go the other way around. We have the dusty real world, and how it works is we get money, 2 liters of light, we buy the supplies in country, the supplies go to our warehouse, the women cooperatives come, they get the materials as a micro loan, then they build it, they rent, they sell it, and then it comes back to the warehouse. And now, how do we digitize all of this? Unpredictability, really.
So now let's dive a bit in the hackathon. So we were facing an existing process, and we had to try to implement it on the blockchain. So the first thing that we had to think is what is feasible in 2 days with a team that has no really deep knowledge of coding. So the first thing for us, it was to build a design that will be then can be built on top to improve complexity and solve more problems. So for an overview of our design here, is that we will be first working with wallets, because in this process we have a lot of entities interacting. So the goal is to be able to track the flow of the money, but also the flow of the goods. So the flow of the materials that were delivered to our warehouse from a supplier, and also the materials that are picked up by the people, by the communities that then want to build this lamp and distribute them. So the goal is really to have something that can be automatized and that can be then scalable for all our missions across the world. So this is exactly what we done on the hackathon. So it's quite simple, and it works with some some tokens, some ERC20 tokens, and some smart contract issuing these tokens and sending them from one entity to the other. Then we thought about other designs, a bit more complex, that might solve more accounting problems, and that might enforce some interaction when we're speaking about tokens that are holding values between our in-house process and, for example, the suppliers that are always very local. Suppliers are local and warehouses are local. So it's very hard to monitor all this from a central point of view.
All right, we're gonna.
So what's interesting is in 1985, trusting social capital was not really institutionalized in microcredit. Today, there's 74 million people and 38 billion in accounts going all around. It's the same thing with SolarLite. We just want to make transparent the fact, the baseline, that there is this whole industry that's not being capitalized on, that women cooperatives all around the world can start their green jobs and green products by putting something where we can actually show it and then later on capitalize on it. They are now earning 250 times more than they did before we started, and we can imagine how many more exponentials we could do.
Next week, the first Wi-Fi streetlight will come out, so we are starting to digitize these villages, and with great hopes that we can take the cash away altogether. So we want to change the face of charitable and donor experiences.
So we'll have a chance to have, can I have my mic, please? Thank you. We'll have a chance to really talk about the other things that are happening. I really want to get into what you've built and what the judges have to say, just because we're short on time and everyone, so... Are there questions? Is there anything that's like key to your presentation you still need to say?
Giacomo.
What's key to our presentation is we didn't have a programmer, so we started to look at all of this, and we saw the sunrise a few times. There's so much potential that we see. We have programmed something that works, but we have only scratched the surface, and we can't wait to actually deep dive in an organized fashion.
Are you guys going to join the virtual hackathon with
please.
us?
If I can add something to this, we're speaking about blockchain, and we were speaking about some really simple design process that then can be implemented in some things more complex. And we know that we could use IPFS and a different recording system that will be very interesting.
And this is a demo. So judges, do you have any questions?
So
Yeah, I have a question. Why are you using a token? Why couldn't it just be Ether?
First, here, the example of the Ether was really for the hackathon. We will be looking maybe using some stable coin or some coin that really don't have this volatility. Then our coin is really to track the goods. So, for example, when the supplier delivers some materials to the warehouse, it's important for us to know that some materials are in this warehouse and to be sure that there was no collusion even in the original point of view, because the supplier and the warehouse are local. So it's kind of question of trust in all this system. It's so big that we really have to want to have a perfect traceability and accountability to avoid any fraud.
Okay, I like your project. I think you don't really need a token. I understand the stable coin in this, but there could be an approach where you don't need to create a new one.
Some social problems, like we have husbands beating up the women that are controlling these warehouses. We have like real threats. Well, the more you go to this unpredictability of women empowerment and supply chains, you really need to protect that you move it away from a cash transaction.
I get that. Yeah, definitely. I'm totally on the page with Ether or crypto. I don't necessarily think that you need to create an additional token, but I think it's a great project, and the blockchain and supply chain management actually should show you already the provenance.
Exactly, the token. We don't want to create a token with value. We want to create a token for the accountability of our system more.
And I won't.
No, it's not a value ICO. It's about tracking really the goods and the material. And we will be using a stable coin, and we could imagine working with stable coin that are already out there, or try to work with a next one coming up that have more trust.
Thank you, guys. Anyone else did you have a question? No? Okay.
It's not really a question. It's just I want to congratulate guys. This is a great project. I'm really happy to see that this type of projects that really are changing the world. So congratulations, guys.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, guys. Did you have fun?
Thank you.
Yep.
Did it surprise you? Did it surprise you? Yeah. Okay. Fantastic.